Okay, Board, welcome to the Board Policy Meeting Committee agenda for March 19th, 2019. Lynn, has the meeting been properly posted?
Yes, it has.
It has. Now is the opportunity for citizens to address the committee, and we have none in the room, and we have no bright lights scheduled. We do have a pretty good bundle of work. I would like to make a mention first that Barbara Brezink is excused today. We do have a good amount of work to cover here. I don't know, some 50 or 60 different policies, some needing to discuss in more length than others. First off, to get it out of the way, we need the approval for the policy minutes from the February meeting. Diane, you're going to be in charge of first approvals motions tonight.
Grab your bite there. Thank you.
I reviewed the minutes and they look fine, so I make the motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Thank you, and I'll second that. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? 2-0, Lynn.
Thank you.
Okay, now, we have 4 new policies. We are going to be moving into our new procedures, which allow us to essentially divide all of the policies that we're looking at up into 3 different categories. And the first category we're going to deal with tonight is that of working with new policies. And the procedure we're going to use there is basically the procedure we've used all along, where we will have a reading here, reading at the board, review the reading here, and go back to the board for final reading and approval. Okay. The first of these is policy 2271.01, Start College Now. And this is essentially a separation of 2 programs, the Early College Credit Program and the Start College Now program. And I've asked Joe if he could give us a little bit about the difference between those 2.
Sure. If you go back a couple of years, there used to be the course options and youth options programs where kids could select to go either to a different school district, and then the money would be paid for, the course would be paid for by the school district of Waukesha, or to a college or technical college to take a class, and again, the school district would cover that. Course options and youth options have since ceased, and they've turned into the Start College Now program and the Early College Credit Program. When we first passed, policy 2271, the Start College Now program policy had not yet been drafted because they were waiting for some approval out of the state. So what you have in front of you is the sole unique policy that addresses Start College Now. It has been separated from the Early College Credit Program, which was where we had previously placed it so that we could put students in these programs this current school year.
And we will see later on that the other policy on on Early College Credit is up for revision in the next bundle.
Yep.
So this is and internal to the policy that we have. Is there anything unique that's been put into this?
Nothing unique there. This is just some clarifying language that came from the state after this was passed and finalized at the state level. And then the other language in this comes from policy 2271, which talked about the Early College Credit Program. Okay. So it's just a refinement of what we already had on policy.
Diane.
I have 2 questions. Was there the limitation on the 18 post-secondary semester credits, like in the bottom B on the first page in the previous language as well?
That's been part of district practice for a long time now.
Okay.
Yep.
So I was just wondering if that had been already in place. And I find the undue financial hardship one kind of an interesting statement, that you may prohibit a student's attendance if the student is a child with a disability, if it would cause an undue hardship to be able to cover the costs of the program that they'd be involved in. Is that something we've ever had to do a refusal based on? Was that language in the old?
This is new. I mean, it was in the policy that was put in place last summer when we passed the last policy. Prior to that, these are new policies with new programs. We have always had the ability to say that something is an undue financial hardship if we're trying to pay for the accommodation. And so what you think of is what would not be an undue financial hardship would perhaps be a piece of technology that a student might bring along with them. But if the student needed an aid in order to access a program, or if they needed an aid and transportation and technology, and you could eventually get to the point where you would say that this course costs too much for the district, therefore, you're not going to be able to take it. So we reserve that right in some unique situations.
Do you want to make a motion?
I can make a motion to approve policy 227101, Start the College Now program as presented.
Seconded here. Any further discussion on this? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 2-0, Lynn. And policy 2420, education for employment. This is a new policy for education for employment. Explains regulatory requirements and addresses the requirements for district's plan regarding education for employment. Education for employment's been around a long time. And this is a new policy which is far more descriptive, I guess is what they're saying. Or is this the first time there's actually been a policy on it?
This is the first time we've had a set policy on this. We've talked about employment under other policies. If you remember academic and career planning, the school counseling policy, we've had this built into different places. In our graduation requirements, we've had expectations around this. But due to the changes of PI 26, we're now having a policy to make sure that we're in compliance with what this state law requires.
And a PI 26, is that a law, or is that something out of the Department of Public Instruction?
This is not out of the Department of Public Instruction.
Is legal?
This comes out of I think the state statute.
State statute, okay.
Wisconsin Administrative Code, I apologize.
Okay. I had really no issues with this when I looked at it. It's something we've been doing.
Yep.
My only question would be, in D, it talks about the board will annually review the plan.
Yeah.
And those sorts of things. So many of these have this, the board will annually review. So that'll be something we have to put in place then because of this.
Yeah,
New-
that was a new one I had.
The teaching and learning team will be working on an annual report probably through the T&L committee, which then would be presented to the committee. The committee is an extension of the board. It would come to the board through the committee chair's report.
Okay. Yeah.
And then in that same one, it's the board will publish its long-range plan and the report on the district's website. So it's going to become a much more visible component of what we're doing, which I think is awesome, since that was my career
I was going to
background.
say, you've lived this one.
Yes. It's so exciting to see the entrepreneurship education and personal financial literacy and all these sorts of things sort of built into what is part of this expectation. So, like I said, I can very heartily recommend that we pass policy 2420, the education for employment as presented.
That was
That's my motion.
And I will second that. Further comments or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 2-0, Lynn.
This is the new school resource officer sheet.
Okay, school resource officer, this is another one. This is what you handed out, something on this one? Did you want to, yeah, I was going to ask you about that because we had all these places for check marks here. Now we have the answers, huh?
Yep, so we included in your packet just the template that was provided to us from Neola. I met with the Waukesha Police Department this past Friday, and we reviewed the requirements of this program.
Okay.
There was nothing in there that had concerned them, and most of these components are covered with our contract with the police. So the board policy then would, either be the directing document for or a supplement of, just depending on how you would look at it, the contract that we have with the Waukesha Police Department, where we're going to go, where letters A through I are going to be in place. That we have the school safety plan in 8420. and that we're going to be, working through this. The only correction that I'd have on here, and this didn't get into my notes to Lynn, and I apologize, is that the deputy superintendent shall serve as the designated liaison between the district and law enforcement agencies. So that would be my role. I'll have Lynn correct that. As we
That's
go
just a
forward.
correction you can make?
Addition, where would that go in the,
If you go below letter I, the paragraph below letter I, it says the building principal shall serve. This would be the deputy superintendent.
okay.
So you're not going to have building principals?
They're not going to serve as the designated liaison between the district and law enforcement agencies.
Oh,
would be me.
okay.
That would be me.
So this is you. And that comes out, the building principals is replaced by deputy superintendent.
Yep.
Shall serve as the designated liaison between the district and law enforcement agents. Do we have more than one agency?
We do. It would be
Sheriff?
agencies, the sheriff's department. It's not a formal SRO program out there, but they
Right.
do have a buddy program for
Okay.
those go on.
So it is agencies, and shall oversee the SR. Where do the principals come in, or is that going to,
Principals will come in when they're
for their building, right?
when they're activated to come in.
But does it have to be in here anyplace?
Doesn't.
Oh, okay. And what was with the red stuff on the bottom that was deleted? I was confused because if we didn't have a policy before, how could we delete something from it?
We just didn't, we decided not to select that as an option.
Oh, that
If
was
you
one of the
go-
options?
It was an option. If you go up,
Check mark.
if you go up into letter I, the agreement between the district and law enforcement shall require law enforcement agencies to provide somebody with an annual report. Letter I covers that, a requirement of the law
This was
enforcement
part of,
agency to
this was
provide.
one of the options in that one, okay.
And so that the option that we selected was that they would provide the superintendent with an annual report on the SRO program. If the committee would like that to say the board, we could add the board in there instead of the superintendent.
Another report, like the others.
It would be something else that would come probably through the Safety and Security Committee.
Well, that would make sense to report to, to the board through the Safety and Security Committee.
Where would you put that?
I mean,
I
Yeah, but where did you say take out the,
take out superintendent and put in board, if that is what you guys would like.
because that would make a lot of sense.
well, otherwise it would be just quietly to the superintendent, right?
Yep. Some districts, it just depends on the level that the board wants to be involved in it. Many districts have the superintendent as the one who receives the report.
It's just one less report that the board doesn't necessarily need, is it? Unless,
Depends on the board member. I think some board members may want to see this report. Some may not. To me,
I see it?
Well, my point is, we're in the process of looking at the contracts for the SRO. And as a Finance and Facilities Committee, we definitely would want to know what policy is directing the contract that we're writing, et cetera. So just because of that very, involved discussion that we just had recently, I would say yes. That
for me-
there are at least, 5 of us on that committee that would like to know how it's working and if the contracts are successfully implemented.
from an operational standpoint, whether I'm giving the report to Todd or I'm giving the report to the board, I don't want to say it doesn't matter. It's the same step for me.
But in this context, with the Safety and Security Committee in place, I think it's a very logical one for the Safety
Could
and
we-
Security Committee to be.
Could you have it provided to the Safety and Security Committee, or do you want to go to the full board?
I would just advocate that we keep it to the board because it'll get to the board through that committee.
Right.
Okay.
If that committee were to ever dissolve, we still would want to create a vehicle for it to
Okay,
get to
let's
the
just
board.
leave it as, then we'll put board in there in place of superintendent. So that doesn't even require, that's not an amendment, we're just changing it.
Yep, this hasn't gone to anybody, so you guys have first stab at it.
Right,
So when I make the motion, I can say that
as changed.
as
But I would, that we're not even at the
As-
point where anything
No,
is.
we don't even have to say it.
Yeah, but just-
Yeah.
We, it's, to provide the board, you can say that if you wish to.
the new policy number 8407 for the School Resource Officer Program as presented.
as presented, as discussed, yes.
And I will second that. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
2-0, Lynn. Okay. And we have a new policy, 8462.01, threats of violence. And this looks like another one where we separated a prior policy into two policies.
Correct. This used to be under the abuse and neglect policy. Recently, there was a change in state statute on how we need to handle school threats and how they need to get reported. There was some clarifying information put out by the Department of Justice. So this policy is in front of you due to those changes. And it talks about how we need to respond if there are threats of violence, including staff training, reporting requirements, possible discipline for anybody who's making those threats. And it also has the legal citation at the end.
And I failed to look for it, but I assume that there's an 8462 that is child abuse or something.
I believe that
Not
is
referenced.
actually, I think it's on here for us to discuss tonight.
Oh,
Yes, it is. Child abuse and neglect is 8462.
it's going to be one of the revisions because this comes out of it and goes into this one without any other changes, right?
May I ask a
Yes,
question?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I recently attended the WASB Legal and Human Resources Conference in the Wisconsin Dells, and we spent a lot of time in one of the seminars I attended talking about the if a special ed student would be the one that is involved in making the threat of violence. Is that addressed some other place, since I didn't see it specifically in this?
When we deal with threats of violence, we go through and we utilize our school resource officers to determine if there is an actual threat or not. After that assessment is done, the discipline then is the thing that comes out, and that's that's up to administrative discretion. So for a student with a disability who may not have the cognitive ability to understand that what they said was wrong, you would approach that very differently, perhaps through an IEP review, versus a student who had calculated a plan and made a threat, and it was a legitimate threat against the school. So again, that's where, we've had some discussions on discipline. That's where administrative discretion needs to come into play.
It wouldn't be in the twin on this, it would be elsewhere into the discipline procedures.
It would fall into the 5600.01 student consequences for student discipline.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Just,
This?
I move that we approve the new policy number 8462.01, threats of violence, as presented.
Second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
2-0 N. Okay. That was our first mouthful. I'll put that over here. All of those were the new policies that we wanted to tackle. And again, those will go back to the board for first reading, back to us, back for second reading, and then approval. The procedure, that we've always used up till now. Now we will be moving into the second category, which is those policies that exist but are having some kind of a revision to them. And there are, I believe, 33 of these, but some of these are duplicates and triplicates of others, so we'll probably have more, like a couple dozen of these to look at. Many of these changes or revisions are not big things. Let me get something else out of the way here. There we go. But it is our new practice to review these, give them after we've read them, give them to the board with the first reading and seek approval at that meeting.
Right. These are, tonight, the upcoming policies are up for their first reading. That first reading happens at committee, and then the second reading and approval would happen at the board.
Okay, so these we do want to be able to go through and see what the revision is. Some of them are more significant than others. First policy is 0161, parliamentary procedure. It's really just mostly a change of some words. The parliamentary procedure instead of authority governing the board for the orderly conduct of meetings shall be based on the simplified version of Robert's Rules of Orders in all cases in which it is not inconsistent with statutes. administrative code and bylaws. We've been operating with that in our policy previously, the simplified version. We've added a sentence here, it's been added, any failure to comply with the above procedure protocols will not affect the validity of any substantive action taken by the board within its legal authority. So that is a sentence that's been added.
Yeah. And this gives the board protection in the event that there was an error in parliamentary procedure to not be able to pass a motion, table something, whatever it might be. And occasionally, not often, but occasionally, we end up with points of order at the board level where, can we do it this way? Can't we do it that way? We want to give the board the authority that if there's a minor error, that they can continue to make their decisions as a board.
A forgiving
Yes.
kind of perspective on it,
And that really is,
the gist of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I make a motion that we approve the policy 0161 parliamentary authority as presented.
and I second that. Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
2-0, Lynn. Oh, nobody said no, can't. Okay. Now we have two policies back to back here, 0164.2 and 0165.3, which really, we are revising one and deleting the others so that it all falls under the same policy language regarding special meetings have been combined into one policy for clarity and to better represent the distinctions between special meetings in common school districts and unified districts. So that apparently there were two different ways that set it up previously.
Yep.
We don't have to worry about that anymore. It's all, this policy essentially is the same, but it brings it all together with one. So,
And I make the motion that we approve policy 0164.2 special meetings and the deletion of policy 0165.3 special meetings as presented.
thank you, and I second that. Any further discussion? Seeing now, everybody in favor say aye.
Aye.
No, no no's, 2-0, Lynn. Okay, that takes care of these two. Okay, now we're going to have a triplet here. Policy 1130 is for administrative employees. Policy, I skipped pages here. 3230 is going to be for professional employees, and the other one is for support staff.
Administration.
Pardon?
And the administration.
That was the first one, wasn't it?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Okay. This is about conflict of interest, which has to do with our responsibilities to avoid being involved with conflict of interest, was really, using something that you're interested in and voting in favor of it or against it, depending on your personal reasons rather than legislative type discussion. Okay. A lot of definition in here describing conflict. I did not tick off any remarks. Wait a minute, there was. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm in the wrong one. Did you have anything on this, Diane?
This is one I've been very much involved in because I wasn't sure if I could run for school board having
Yes.
two family members as members of our staff, teaching
I
staff.
would just highlight for the committee that that this policy only governs administrators, professional staff, and support staff. There's a
school
bylaw. There's a bylaw that talks about how board members must
yeah.
act. So I just want to make sure that there's a distinction, particularly when we get to the board level.
I was going to ask that question because I thought, I've had an issue in the past, way back there, that where I was getting pay from an educational association, and I had to be careful that I wasn't voting for that pay when it came up at finance. So I understand what you're saying, but that is not in here.
Correct.
Thank you.
This
It'll be in the bylaws, yeah.
is employees of the district.
Right. Is there anything in this one that concerns you?
No.
You can approve all three of these at one
So
shot.
I'm just thinking that they would be a package deal.
Yeah.
Because the language is very, very, very,
think
very
it's the
similar
same.
as you go through the three documents. So I make a motion to approve policy 1130, policy 3230, and policy 4230 on conflict of interest as presented.
And I will second that. Any discussion? All in favor of accepting all three of these policies as revised, please say aye.
Aye.
2-0, Lynn. Okay, now we have three more. 1213, 3213, 4213. Same concept, administration, professional, and support staff. Policy language clarified to indicate that it pertains exclusively to administrators rather than including administrative assistants who are support staff members. Revisions have also been made to these policies to clarify the options regarding instant reporting procedures. The revisions are intended to clarify that while reporting to law enforcement is required as part of our procedure, staff may be required to report to the building administrator as well. Revision is also made to clarify that the restriction on social media posting of student-related material refers to staff personal social media accounts. This provision is not intended to prohibit or limit content on school or district-managed accounts, provided that parental opt-out elections and other pupil confidentiality requirements are observed relative to any such procedures. And I got to get back to those. I made a note to myself that says Joe question mark on it.
Sure.
So do you want to roll with this? Because there's a lot of green and red on this one.
You know, the intent of this policy change is to clarify by employee group who's responsible for what. So the old policy talked about administrative staff members. That was confusing in nature. This is, the 1000 series is an administrator. The other stuff sought to take away any confusion. So the second paragraph, an administrator who is found to have had sexual contact with any student. Before it was a student age 16 or older. The board does not want to have any gray area where an adult would have, a relationship with a student, shall be referred to the proper authorities. If you go down to the next paragraph, each superintendent shall maintain a standard of care for the supervision, control, protection to students commensurate with his or her assigned duties. I would say that we would want to change superintendent to administrator, just to make sure that language is consistent with the rest of the policy.
Yes.
An administrator shall report, so it talks about the reporting requirements. Really, this policy simplifies the reporting requirements to reduce any possible confusion that a staff member may have about what their obligations are. Again, anything that is struck in red was there and is being removed. Anything in green is an addition. And again, this is a legal update that we're entertaining here, but also a practice update based off of the deletions.
You're right. And go ahead, Diane.
I have a question
Yes.
on K, where it's talking about the fact that an administrator other than the superintendent shall not transport students for school-related activities in a private vehicle without the approval of his or her immediate supervisor and consistent with the provisions of policy 8660. So that's saying, and then as it goes on in the next two as well, that basically nobody should be offering a kid a ride home if they, need one.
There are some provisions in 8660 which allow us to do that. For instance, a social worker would have the ability to transport a kid in a difficult situation. But there are steps that we need to take. So we would want to make sure that we're paying attention to 8660, which I think is the student transportation policy.
That's what I was guessing that was.
Which outlines the conditions under which you would, with
Allow
written
that.
permission, or in a situation where there's a need. From time to time, we'll have a student whose parents are unavailable at the end of the day for whatever reason it might be, and we've got a student who's stranded at school. We don't want that child to be stranded if we have staff who are authorized to take that person home.
It's a volunteer driver. I'm guessing is 8660 like the volunteer driver program or no?
It's not necessarily a volunteer. I'd have to look up the policy to be specific, but we do have policy language that designates certain staff members as being able to transport kids if needed and under certain conditions.
Every year I'd have to do the volunteer driver one, that if I'd have a student that couldn't get to work, and as a co-op supervisor, that I could take them to work, that they didn't miss a day just
Correct.
because they couldn't get there.
Yeah, but I think that probably has a different, probably just has a different name right now than volunteer driver. I think it's been maybe just generalized a little bit.
I was going to look up 8660 and I didn't get a chance to today, but okay.
So that was the administrative,
Transportation by private vehicle.
is that what it is?
By private vehicle, yeah.
Thanks, Lynn.
And that, like I said, we just called it the volunteer driver, that you had to show your insurance and, get verification that you didn't have any bad driving record or anything like that before you'd be allowed to transport kids.
That was the first one, Joel. Then you get into this, the professional staff.
And there I have another question.
Okay, let's go with that then.
In G, a professional staff member shall not send students on any personal errands.
Correct.
Like, when you send the kid down to go get your visitor and bring them back to your classroom.
That's different than going to pick up my dry cleaning. That would
And
be
that's why, I'm almost thinking it needs more clarification, because that's what came to my mind immediately, and especially after reading the safety, kind of secure entrance kind of policies.
But that's not going to the office to pick up my papers is not personal, that's business.
Okay,
Going to the front office to escort the guest speaker down to the classroom is business related.
Okay.
It's not a personal errand. A personal errand would truly be pick up my dry cleaning, go get me lunch, go get me a coffee. Can you take this stack of mail to the post office for me? Those are personal errands. Anything that would be, please take this pass to Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, that's all in the business realm.
okay.
So that word personal is very important.
Keyword here.
Keyword,
It's
yes.
almost worth underlining or something.
Or just a clarification, because as I'm reading it, I'm thinking of a dozen things I had kids do all the time. Well, because you're not going to leave your classroom to go get a guest, and leave
Right, I mean, all with-
26 kids unattended,
That's all within the scope of your professional duties.
Right.
There's nothing personal about being the employee, right? Outside of
Right.
the personal touch that you bring in, because it would just fall within the scope of your duties.
Okay.
I don't, to understand that, I used to have student helpers that took a youth service learning class that would be with me from different periods of the day. And those kids would go down to the office, they would make copies. They would take care of certain errand type things for me over the course of the day, but it was all business related.
Yeah.
It was all my job as a teacher.
Within the building.
Key difference, yes.
Okay.
Okay?
Because obviously that repeats in all three of them.
Yes, it does. I just checked.
Those kind of notions. The whole social media piece of it too. That's M and N. Staff members shall not engage students in social media and online networking media except for board-approved academic and co-curricular programs. So that's sort of like saying if someone's, just been in an accident, and you want to send get well wishes to them, that would not be acceptable to do something like that on a personal email,
Right.
to a student.
Right.
So that is the correct interpretation.
That is, because this
Yeah.
all leads down, any social media connection between a staff member and a student leads you down a very, very dangerous path. If, however, you are the basketball coach and you've got a Waukesha North Hoops Twitter page, Twitter feed, and you're, using that to communicate with your athletes and share the good news,
Right.
that's different because it's Waukesha North's basketball Twitter or Facebook or whatever it might be. That's not the individual teacher, Mr. or Mrs. So-and-so, sending the student, Joe, a message through private email or whatever it might be. All staff, all students have email. It should be within the scope of what the the coursework is. If I'm a 8th hour math teacher and I need to send a message to my students, I can have an email group, or I can have some sort of social media group that would be, hey, make sure your
Class.
math work is done, or watch this video before class tomorrow. That's
Right.
one scope, but it wouldn't be me as the teacher emailing you directly through my own personal account.
What about the situation on, is email included in social media here?
Email not, but so that's not a good example. But Twitter, Facebook,
Well, the reason I asked that,
Instagram,
recently one of
Snapface,
the,
whatever
one
they
of
got out
the
there.
students got a Coles Award.
Yep.
I sent him a congratulations. School district email to him.
Again, that's email is one thing, all done through the district, all related to
Okay.
something that happened at school. If the line that you may cross is if you send them an email saying, "Hey, I saw your parents out at the grocery store,
Oh.
and they were telling me about all this," and then you're starting to cross a line
Okay.
of personal and
I-
what would be the scope of the district business.
Yeah.
Congratulations for the Cole Award. Centers around education. It's a celebration for us.
Common sense has a big role here.
It does. And just making sure that you're always operating in a position where you cannot be accused of any improprieties based off of your connection to kids, being a staff member, connected to students in any social media realm.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for the clarifications, and I think it's time to make the motion.
Yes, it is.
For
1213.
policy 1213, policy 3213, and policy 4213, student supervision and welfare, with the modification that we made on the first one in the fourth paragraph. Otherwise, as presented.
And I second that. And any further discussion? See none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
No no's, 2-0, thank you. Okay, another triplicate. 1460, 3160, and 4160, final exam, physical exams, and duplication of stuff that we've already seen, and the Board of Education has changed to the board all throughout this one. Employment test screening. Actually, I thought we had done an approval on this previously, Joe. What was that about?
We did. We added the TB language in, but if you were to go to the second page of the policy, in the event of a report of a condition that could influence job performance of an employee other than the superintendent shall base a non-employment recommendation to the board upon a conference with the examining physician and substantiation that the condition is directly correlated to job responsibilities that will not allow the prospective. So, this is the added piece, that paragraph on the back page of the policy. And then if the question ever came up about what happens with the superintendent, that would come through the board president.
Okay. Was that the paragraph on, wait a minute, no. 1460, the green paragraph?
Big green paragraph. So this would be, give me an example when this would kick in.
Oh, I see what, I got my answer. Go ahead.
Say, for instance, if somebody got injured riding their bike or their motorcycle, they fell down, hit their head, had a concussion, traumatic brain injury, whatever it might be, you would need to go through a certain procedure to determine that they're not fit for duty. And this would be that procedure.
Okay. And that had not been anything like that in place up to this point?
This is new language for this, yeah. We've always had the ability, I think, to question that. This just makes it clear.
Why don't they identify, or should we identify, 1460 doesn't say this is for administrators, does it?
1460, the unique part of 1460 is the paragraph.
No, I'm talking about the title. Tell us right up front that this is, 1460 is for the administrative
The
staff.
whole 1,000 series is for administration.
Oh, okay, and that's why these would fall into those series.
And then the whole 3,000 is for professional staff.
Yeah.
And the 4,000 is for
I
support
remember
staff.
that now. Okay.
Very helpful. I was wondering that myself
Oh,
as I'm going
well.
through this is just like that one. This is just like that one.
So we could in the title necessarily, but in the beginning of it where it says 1460 physical examination, could we put in parentheses administrative?
We would have to do that for everything then
Oh, don't do it then.
that would be in the 1,000 series.
Don't do that.
I think it's just for
I'll
clarification
remember
here.
it.
And when you look things up online,
Then you would catch it.
you will see that the 1,000 series is titled administration.
So if we looked
2,000.
online for physical examination, we would get three answers to it.
If you typed in physical exam, a minimum of 3 policies would pop up that would talk about physical
I know
exam.
it comes up with the words in there anyplace, okay. And I don't think there's any significant changes elsewhere in here, is there? No, that's basically the same one that keeps popping up. Okay,
I think just the note that I discovered as I was going through these, the national origin looked like it was being deleted, but it's really
that's
moved up to an earlier spot. It's race, color, national origin. So it's not like we're getting rid of national origin. It's as a higher, it's ranked earlier in the listing.
why don't I find the
It
word?
was actually duplicated
Oh,
accidentally.
in there twice?
Yes,
Oh.
and so they're just recommending that we,
Just delete the second.
one of them, instead of listing it twice, yeah.
Where is it, on the first page?
In the last paragraph, right before the Neola copyright, it lists the.
Oh, way back there, I saw it, and there it is, yeah.
So it lists the classes of race, color, national origin, age, sex, and then like 3 lines
Yeah,
down, it
I
lists
got it.
national origin a second time. So
Yeah, I see it now.
that's the kind of thing.
It was duplicated, yep.
Just duplication, clean it up.
And that's in all 3 of them also.
Yes, yes.
Okay, do you want to move?
So I'm ready to make the motion to approve policy 1460, policy 3160, and policy 4160 on physical examination as presented.
And I second that. Further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of accepting those 3 revisions, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 2-0, Lynn. And now I lost my place, just a minute. Okay, now we get mostly singletons left. Unrequested, 1461, unrequested leaves of absence because of fitness of duty. And this is about administrators as well. And Joe, anything meaty in here?
Not really.
Looks like a lot
it
of
really just identifies this as an administrative directed policy.
Yeah.
You can see that administrative staff member or staff member is crossed out, and it's just
They're just, yeah,
focusing on the administration.
administrative, yeah.
Again, it's a 1,000 series policy.
Right. Okay. Anything on that one, Diane?
No, I don't. So I will move that we approve policy 1461, unrequested leaves of absence, fitness of duty as presented.
I second that. Discussion? None? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Said aye?
Aye.
Didn't mean to pressure you there. Okay. My page here. 1623. Section 504, ADA prohibition against disability and discrimination. Reference to work days has been changed to business days to be consistent with other policies concerning complaints processing. Note that the use of working days is used in some statutory timelines, as is the term business days. Both terms are defined at any day of the week excluding weekends and recognized holidays. And that, why can't I find anything read? Oh, here it is. That's all on the 3rd page. It changed work days to business days. That's it.
That's pretty much, yeah.
You want to move on it?
I move that we approve policy 1623, section 504, ADA prohibition against disability discrimination in employment as presented.
And I second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 2-0, Lynn. Next is 2270, religion in the curriculum. Oops. So turn too many pages here. Okay. It's another one. Language has been removed from the policy which could be construed as inconsistent with the board's authority. Also, as outside parties have appeared to increase their scrutiny of references to religion in the curriculum, the terminology in this policy has been clarified to better conform to the legal standards. Joe, have you been through this one with CNI or TNL?
Yep, we reviewed it. Teaching religion in our curriculum has not been an issue.
No.
The only thing that we ever really butt up against it would be in the musical performances. Sometimes in a social studies curriculum where you're mentioning the religion that's associated with a region of the world, but you're not teaching the theology behind it. You're just making reference to the religion, which is perfectly acceptable by this policy. The other thing, is if you get into holiday music, you may have some that has a religious theme in it. This policy says that is okay, but that you're not trying to proclaim any one faith. I think the most important thing to note is that down on the bottom, the strikeout is what's of real importance here, is no classroom teacher shall be prohibited from providing reasonable periods of time for activities of moral, philosophical, or patriotic theme. No student shall be required to participate in such activities. This is what eliminates the potential controversial component to this policy.
Okay.
Out,
yeah. Yeah, I read this one more closely, and it made perfect sense to me. But, yeah.
And I know there is the Religions of the World type of class. It was taught in the room right next to my office. I used to hear, it was very insightful to hear the different, just an explanation about the different kinds of religions without obviously teaching religion. It was just an awareness of the influence it has on so many different parts of history.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I recommend that we approve policy 2270, religion in the classroom, in the curriculum as presented.
And I second that. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
2-0, Lynn. Which brings us to policy 2271, early college credit program, and this is where we get into the a new one we dealt with earlier, right?
So in addition to the removal of the Start College Now program, this policy then clarifies that students should be given the notice about early college credit starting in 8th grade, because that's when they do their high school course selection, so that they can access this when they're in high school. So you'll note that towards the bottom of the policy, students enrolled in grades 8 to 11.
By October 1st.
Yep.
Each year.
Yeah, that's good.
Which seems early. I understand that you want to have them be aware of it as they're trying to do their high school plan. But October 1st seems like they've just gotten there, and
Yeah, from our district though, we begin school choice on December 1st. So, about 2 months later, kids are picking which high school that they want to go to. And then we start our student scheduling starting in January, February. So all of that stuff starts much earlier than what it used to. But we set a goal to make sure that all high school kids had their following years or upcoming years schedule in their hands before they leave for the summer. To make sure that we can take care of scheduling, both the building schedule and the student schedule, so that we don't have 200 students outside of the guidance lines. And so we did bump this stuff up a little bit earlier, and that's why this isn't too far off for where our 8th graders are.
Well, several things come to my mind. One, first of all, we're going to do it every year, so it's not just the 8th graders, it's doing it for everybody in that time of the year.
8th, 10th, and 11th.
Right.
Yep.
And for an 8th grader to be selecting one of those college programs as college for credits is not, these are college credits. It's not going to be happening very often, but at least they're there if they're needed. For instance, maybe a college course or something in mathematics. And there are some that could do that. Okay, anything else, Diane?
No, I make the motion that we approve policy 2271, early college credit program as presented.
Thank you. I second that. Any discussion? No discussion. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
2-0. Okay. Moves us into 2461, recording of IEP team meetings. And I think I'm just going to let Joe tell us about this one.
Yeah, so from time to time, there's a request to do an audio, video recording of an IEP team. So what we have learned in time is that, we want to make sure that we establish a process for this to happen, not that we prohibit it from happening. And so you can see in this policy, under point A, that we have the ability to, set some criteria as to what needs to happen. So the parent must notify us that an audio recording of an IEP team is necessary. They need to do that within 2 days before the IEP meeting. We need to understand why this is appropriate for that situation. The principal will notify the status of the request and the need for any clarification before the meeting if they intend to deny the parent's request to record the meeting. So we still have the ability to deny it if we don't think it's a good request. But we also ask that, the parents give us some information. If the district representative denies the request, we'll state in writing the reasons why and alternative options or accommodations to permit the parent to understand the IEP process or to implement the parent's rights. So parents have rights within the IEP process. It's a document that we provide families on an annual basis. We want to work with our families in all circumstances, but if they're going to make a recording of the meeting, we want to ensure why it's being recorded.
And then I think
We do
it's
not allow video recording of IEP meetings.
just audio.
Just audio. It'll be an audio.
And that's
audio
clear.
only. Yep.
Is this an often sought-after thing? Didn't think so. This was kind of the first time I thought about it. Never
Right.
thought about it until I read
We
this.
do it from time to time, have people who try to put their cell phone on the table and record the meeting without our knowledge, and knowing that they did that, then they're in violation of our policy, and therefore we have some recourse if that happens.
So I could see that happening if like dad's there and mom couldn't make it, trying to tape it and take it back to share with her what was discussed or something, and again, but that would not be unacceptable because this is saying that it becomes a part of the student's educational record and is maintained
Right?
at the
and-
school. It wouldn't be something that you could take home and share with a spouse.
And we would do everything we can to make sure that we have both parents' participation. And just because we had an IEP meeting on one date doesn't mean we can't sit down on another day when parents are available. Both parents are available in that instance and review the IEP and revise it if necessary. So we do have multiple opportunities, but we also have to have an IEP meeting once every 364 days. So we
That's the way it works.
sometimes butt up. Yeah, you have to do it a year from the date of the meeting minus 1 day.
Okay.
Well, I make a motion that we approve policy 2461, the recording of IEP team meetings as presented.
And I will second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
2-0, Lynn. Policy 3120.04, employment of substitutes. And contracting with a service, blah, blah, blah. District intent interest is in having substitutes that are properly certified and preferably grade level and subject matter certified, but must retain flexibility to use any of the various mechanisms for certification. Revision is also made to clarify and make it easier for the superintendent, who has the authority to end a current assignment or to remove an individual from the substitute list, although for any reason not arbitrary, capricious, or discriminatory. And I think that's discussed in here. Anything else in there, Joe, that is of meat?
Nothing that is inconsistent with how we operate.
do it.
Yep.
We use the service, as it talks about in the second paragraph.
We do
correct?
not use a service.
We
We
do not.
kept the service piece in there in the event that the board would ever allow administration to use a service if it were necessary. Substitute teachers are increasingly hard to find. Fill rates are definitely difficult. Every school district in the area runs into these challenges.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of districts have moved to sub-services due to the broader pool of candidates. We do not have that at this time, but if we were ever granted that authority, we would go ahead and do that. And that would require a contract that we'd have to bring in front of FNF anyway, so there would be board scrutiny of the process.
I appreciate that the second from the last paragraph says that in order to retain well-qualified substitutes for service in this district will offer competitive compensation. And I think that that's an important factor.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
So I move that we approve policy 3120.04, the employment of substitutes as presented.
second that. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed? 2-0, Lynn. Okay, now we got a duplicate here, 3139 and 4139, staff discipline. Been removed, to remove reference to termination as that it is covered in a different policy, number 3140, renewal, non-renewal, resignation, or termination. The policy is also revised to include an option to address the non-disciplinary nature of corrective action related to performance, such as the use of performance improvement plans. Policy 4139 for support staff has been modified to allow for employment termination by the superintendent unless the board action is required. And Joe, anything you want to add to that?
No, it's just, I think the important addition to this is to note that a plan of improvement is not a disciplinary step. It's a plan of support to help somebody become better at their job. You know, better at many aspects of their job or better at one aspect of their job. It's a plan of support. It's not a disciplinary thing. And so we don't want to tie plans of support to staff discipline.
And that's what they took out in here, down here.
That's the added paragraph at the bottom of the page.
Yeah. And
The next policy, the staff discipline for support staff allows the superintendent to issue discipline, including termination, unless the board action is required by law. So this would be a situation where an aide acted in a manner that could lead to termination, that the superintendent would be able to address that instead of having to bring that employee to the board. They don't have the same level of right as the professional staff member does.
okay,
All right, so I will make a motion to approve policy 3139 and policy 4139 related to staff discipline.
and I will second that. Any discussion? In favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, 2-0. 5512, tobacco, nicotine, and related products by students. And, okay. Continuing efforts to keep up with modern realities, including the constant evolution of student of student conduct requiring disciplinary or other correction action. This policy is revised to include prohibition on the use of nicotine patches, nicotine gum at the school, and nicotine gum at the school. Note the possession and use of nicotine products by minors is already prohibited by Wisconsin law. The policy is revised to permit exception to the use by students of certain products containing nicotine if done under the direction of medical practitioner and consistent with the district's medications policies in situations in which the product is part of an approved cessation program. Okay.
Pretty self-explanatory.
It is.
It takes vape pens, it includes vape pens as a violation of the nicotine and tobacco policy by students, and it does allow for a student who is trying to quit smoking, for instance, or chewing tobacco, to have a nicotine patch on at school if it's prescribed by a medical provider.
Didn't we deal something with vapors, but was that a different policy?
Yep, we've added that into the student discipline policy,
Oh,
the vape pens.
Okay.
Right, so I would move that we approve policy 5512, use of tobacco, nicotine, and related products by students as presented.
I second that. Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 2-0, Lynn. Policy 5516 on student hazing. Okay. This policy is revised to remove the requirement that the hazing policy be distributed as presently required. There is no separate legal requirement that a hazing policy be created or disseminated. Only the bullying policy is required. I'm not sure that I like this one, but I don't know if I'm missing something.
So all of our discipline policies are put into our student handbook, so they are disseminated. The bullying policy is one that we have to draw special attention to.
Okay.
The more policies that we have to draw special attention to, the greater the likelihood that it may not get directly disseminated to students. So we have these disciplinary policies in place. Again, this is a recommendation that's coming to us from Neola. It's something that we can take. We don't have to take, but
Well, my concern was student hazing. Now, let me put it this way. In the discipline policy, how is student hazing dealt with?
depends on the situation. There is a policy on hazing that talks specifically, I mean, as you see it here, what we're to do if we see examples of hazing.
Oh, wait, let me see if I'm reading this correct. This is a requirement that this policy is changed to strictly for the distribution of the policy.
Correct.
Okay.
Policy doesn't.
It's still, the policy's not going away. It's just the
Okay.
the fact that you have to sit down with the kids every year and say, we have to really talk about this
Okay.
one, rather than it's just in the handbook and there for your review type
In the
of thing.
handbook, it's posted online. It
Councilman
gives our
Larkin.
administration the guidance it needs. I would say that, I mean, if I get a phone call or if Luke Pinning gets a phone call from an administrator dealing with a situation, or if we get a phone call from a parent with a concern, in 99 circumstances out of 100, it is talking about bullying.
Okay.
It is not specifically mentioning hazing. Hazing is something that we would tend to tease out through our investigation.
Hazing, just by my years of experience in the district, what used to be a big problem. And it really has, I think, been dramatically decreased.
It used to be associated with some sort of initiation with a sports team or a club or
Even
whatever it might
freshmen
be.
coming into the
Right.
school,
And it certainly is something that we emphasize, but again, on a day-to-day, on an operational standpoint, we deal with a lot more concerns that would be pertain to bullying
Oh, yes.
than we would with hazing.
I'm okay.
rather than have them on the same level in terms of pulling them out. Like
Well,
back
just-
15, 20 years ago, I would have said, no, they need to know that this is not okay. But I think our culture has dramatically changed, and that really is not as much of a need as bringing out the
Yeah.
bullying.
I agree with that, too.
But again, the
I had
policy
read this-
doesn't-
I had read this incorrectly.
Yeah, the policy doesn't go away. The
Yeah.
policy and the expectation is still there. It's just, do we need to distribute
The
it?
distribution, I'm fine with that.
Okay, then I will make a motion to approve policy 5516 on student hazing as presented.
Seconded here. Discussion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
2-0, Lynn. The schools and governmental agencies. Oops. Close this up too soon. I gotta find. Okay. 5540. Policy has been revised to reflect that a school official will attempt to contact students' parents, a student's parent, before law enforcement questions a student, unless specifically requested not to, because such contact would duly impede the investigation. The addition of the word attempt was included because school personnel do not have a requirement to reach the parents prior to law enforcement questioning a student. So this is quite simply on the bottom of page 2.
E.
Note the law enforcement officer that the school official will be the law enforcement officer that the school official will be attempting to contact the student's parent or parents after questioning unless specifically requested not to. After questioning? I thought they were going to do it before questioning. That's in the case of,
This is what, I mean, if a law enforcement officer is going to come to the school, in most circumstances, we are directed not to contact anybody that there's questioning going on, because you don't know who else could be complicit in a crime.
But that says the policy is revised to reflect that a school official will attempt to contact a student's parent before.
The write-up, the summary just isn't consistent with what,
Policy
with the
language.
policy. I have that same
Let me
note.
let me read this through here real quick.
It's 3D, basically. It specifically says after questioning.
Yeah,
And I specifically requested not to because such contact would unduly impede
And
the
I think when I read
investigation.
that earlier myself, I didn't read it that way because I'd read this thing. But they are opposite, I think.
And that's just our summary. It would
Yeah,
have to
but
be
you
changed.
get, Lynn, do you get this, all these abbreviated summaries, do you get these directly from Neola?
Yep. Between now and the board meeting, we will call and get get clarification on
Revisit
this.
that one?
Yeah.
I think we better. 5540.
First 2 pages of your packet had a listing of all the policies and that little paragraph after each one. Those are directly from
That's what I've been
Neola's
using,
update.
and that's very useful.
Okay.
But in this case, there's something at odds there. So we'll put that one aside. Policy 5772, weapons. Okay. We're getting there, guys. Oh, this was just a change in terminology. The reference to the criminal, quotation mark, the criminal justice or juvenile delinquency system has been changed to be consistent with other policy references. And they basically have deleted those terms and just gone with law enforcement, which we have done in some other
Yep.
policies earlier, so.
So seeing that minor change, I recommend the approval of policy 5772 on weapons as presented.
Thank you. I will second that. Discussion. All in favor of accepting 5772 as revised here, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 2-0, Len. 5870, student production of goods and services. This one got a little bit complicated for me, I'll tell you that one.
And I thought it was exciting to see after teaching business law and entrepreneurship for years and years and years.
Well, they added a whole new paragraph. Students who develop ideas, concepts, or materials which may carry with them intellectual property characteristics may pursue protection of those rights on their own. No district staff may take steps to claim intellectual property rights relative to any work, product created by a student or students, except as expressly approved by the superintendent and agreed to by participating students prior to the commencement of any projects. The district does not determine the protectable nature of any particular work. So it's pretty clear, I guess. So these are little projects they do as.
Yep, if they do them, they're their own property. Think of a class where they're teaching coding and such. Unless, of course, a student signs on to be part of a staff member's project, and the staff member then gets consent that their work will go towards the betterment of whatever the district and that would be the difference then in these two policies, or in this policy as it relates to intellectual property.
I think that happens a lot more at the university level. When they sign on with their professor who's doing a research project
part
and,
would, yeah.
and that type of thing. Here, though, I think of the example at West High School, a young man who did the app on being able to schedule the activities at West. That if that concept would be something that they could actually market and design and go with on a broader scale. Just because it happened in a computer apps class, or whatever class it was in, doesn't mean that student should not be able to claim their intellectual property.
This says
that
he can do that.
This is saying it gives them rights.
And it's not strictly software stuff. It could be something in
Totally.
woodworking or.
Oh, yeah, exactly. It could be just your idea of a new trademark, kind of concept, whatever. It really broadens up the whole area of intellectual property, which is awesome.
Okay.
So, because of my enthusiasm, I would recommend that we approve policy 5870, student production of goods and services.
And I second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
2-0. Then, okay.
Bless you.
Policy 6150, tuition income. Quite simply says the tuition charges must be based on a statutory formula or other acceptable methods approved by Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. And that's what we do, isn't it?
It is what we do, yes.
Just being clarified to make it,
Right. And the state puts out a formula, and since we run, for instance, our DHH program, there's a formula that's used to calculate the tuition for that. It's not arbitrarily set by the district as a moneymaker. It's, it's a state formula. So that would be one example in Waukesha where we would be charging tuition for something.
All right, so I recommend that we approve policy 6150 on tuition income as presented.
seconded, discussion? No one there, please say aye. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
2-0, Lynn. 6220, budget preparation. And I've got to get to the right page. Oh. As DPI currently provides a format for the preparation of the proposed budget that we must follow and do follow, I put that in myself, the detailed components in the policy are not necessary and would lead to confusion, and all they simply did is take all the little bullet points out of this policy.
Right.
Less is more.
Yeah.
The school finance team does a great job of letting us know as a district what we need to put in all of our policies, or what we need to put into our budget. So it's better just to follow their template and not have to come back and revise policy.
Yep,
If it's inconsistent.
Unnecessary and
Yeah.
redundant and repetitive, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, Diane?
All right, so I move that we approve policy 6220, budget preparation as presented.
Thank you. I second that. Discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
2-0, Lynn. Which moves us to 6235. Fund balance. This policy is revised so that it more accurately reflects the accounting practices and incorporates the descriptions of different fund balance designations directly in this policy. So they,
Just as adding definitions.
all
for
of them are
not
defined, the
responsible.
non-spendable, the restricted, the committed, assigned, unassigned, they're all defined in here, and that's
Pretty
the
much
sum and
what it
substance
is.
of it.
So I make a motion that we approve policy 6235 on fund balance as presented.
Thank you, and I second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 2-0, Lynn. Okay, policy 6440, cooperative purchasing. The language has been modified to acknowledge current practices of purchasing via the state contract administered by the Wisconsin Department of Administration or through CISA joint purchasing contracts. And it looks like they just actually added a phrase to that effect, huh?
So again, simply making,
It's making a clarifying statement in policy.
so I move that we approve policy 6440, the cooperative purchasing as presented.
I second that. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. 2-0, Lynn. $74.40, facility security. This policy has been revised to identify that any parent visiting the district are required to comply with policy 9150, school visitors, and any other relevant policies and administrative guidelines, as well as refer to the district's policy on developing the school safety plan in the manner more fully described in 8420. Further additional grammatical changes have been made. Oops. So, we are defining, or we are developing a district school safety plan. We have, right?
We have one, yes.
Compliance with state and federal laws.
Yes.
And,
We got school visitors policy 9150.
right,
Just making sure that parents understand that they need to comply with that as well.
you made some terminology on the bottom here that said instead of main office, they're going to refer to it as the school office, which makes sense. And yes, we may permanently restrict a parent, maybe made by the superintendent due to, yeah, I think we've been,
I found this fascinating reading. After having, like, people show up at the front door thinking that they can just come in and visit as a salesperson or something, and it's like, no,
No way.
do you have to, do you have an appointment? And actually really reinforcing the fact that, they must contact the classroom teacher to verify that the visitor is expected and is okay to come in. And even a fine of $1,000 for somebody that comes in and just like throws a hissy because they can't get their way to come and see the teacher that they don't have a right to come and go see, it's like, oh, this sounds really good. I'm gonna make a copy of that and send it to people that have been in violation in the past.
well, they can be fined up to $10,000.
$10,000. $10,000, yeah, if they throw too much of a hissy.
Okay,
So I think it's a great idea. So I'm going to recommend that we approve policy 7740 for facility security as presented.
seconded by me. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. 2-0, Lynn. Policy 8310. Policy has been revised to add clarity to the personal use exception related to notes under the Wisconsin Public Records Law. Wisconsin Court of Appeals recently issued an unpublished decision interpreting the personal use exception. Other general updates were also made to the policy language. Joe, you want
Yeah, so
to, this is a
if
long
you guys remember back to we talked about the Appleton case they were doing some review material. Is it an open meeting? Is it not an open meeting? A lot of this stems from that. And in many situations, when you're really kind of what this boils down to is if I'm in a meeting and I take down some notes and those notes are for my personal use only, and they're not meant to be shared, they're not going to generate a document or anything like that. They really then retain my notes. But there are situations then where notes are taken and then they're passed, so at a board meeting, if I'm sitting next to you, Bill, I, write down a little note and I pass it, that can become a public record then. And so what this public records policy seeks to do is to provide some clarification to staff around that issue.
Okay. Yeah, that's always been I don't want to say an issue of dispute, but it's a complication for people.
Yep.
Best not to just start writing and passing things around.
But okay to take notes, which is something that I do all the
Okay
time.
to take notes, and if you take notes and you use those notes to generate an email to somebody, you may then have now something that's subject to a public record. If you take those notes down and you're going to go into another meeting, or if you're just going to go back and reflect on something, then the note stays as a personal note. At least that's how this has been described to me.
Have they ever resolved the issue of two board members texting, electronic things?
Text message right now is an undecided
That's what I thought.
area.
On here?
It's not on here right now. I think the other thing to point out here, though, and this is something that the general public, we're going to have to make the general public aware of. It's on the back page. The district may impose a fee under the request upon the requester of a copy record of 2 cents per page for black and white copy, which represents the actual necessary and direct cost of reproduction of the record. In addition, the district may impose a fee upon requester for the actual time spent by district employees in locating a record if the cost is $50 or more. In calculating the cost, the district will use the applicable employee's hourly rate for salary and benefits. So there's some times where we get requests, that would require Todd to redact it. And so what we're going to be doing, I'm going to be meeting with Sue Ettinger, who's our custodian of records, meeting with the business office to make sure that we've got a table of everybody's hourly rate, so that when we do generate this, we're not guessing, but we're actually producing, Sue Ettinger needed to spend 25 hours. This is her hourly rate. This is the bill for Sue. But Todd had to spend 40 hours redacting. Here's Todd's rate for the redaction. And so that we can put together an accurate cost estimate for some of these record requests.
Yeah.
And that's all new, all the green
Well,
there.
we've been
And the
allowed
2
to
cents a
charge-
page and,
We've been allowed to charge up till now, but I don't know if it's ever seen it.
We've never really put that component into practice. We've always charged per copy. So it used to be, I think, 25 cents a page is what we used to charge.
Oh.
We're no longer able to do the 25 cents per page because a page of paper with print on it doesn't cost 25 cents. We're now able to do 2 cents per page, but to
Right.
figure in how
course.
much time goes into it, that then, can sometimes change the game for records requests.
Yeah, and some people have abused it, that past history. So,
well, I move that we approve policy 8310 on public records as presented.
seconded by Bill. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
2-0, Lynn.
One of many
Oh.
fascinating readings in this process.
Well, there were some in here, yes. 9130, public requests, suggestions, and complaints. Portion of the policy dealing with the guidelines for matters regarding instructional materials has been modified to clarify the appeal process steps and provide additional guidance to the board on methods it may use to conduct the final review of a committee's decision when under appeal. Okay, that must be more on the back page here.
This would be just where it goes under 4th level D. If the matter has not been satisfactorily addressed at the 3rd level, there's a couple sentences there. Any such request must be submitted within 10 business days of the latest attempt to resolve the matter. So this
That's
puts
it.
a timeline on when somebody can make that request.
So, timeline, that's it.
And I thought it was interesting that they identify. I think it's good to document it, the way, what the expectations are in this process. So I move that we approve policy 9130, public requests, suggestions, or complaints as presented.
Seconded. Discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
2-0, Lynn. Number 9160, public attendance at school events. This policy has been revised to add a cross-reference to policy 7217, weapons. It requires that persons attending school events will be subject to the provisions of the district's adopted weapons policy. And that's,
Page of
there
the
it is.
policy reflects that.
Persons attending school events are subject to the provisions of policy 7217, weapons. Much more,
Pretty clear cut.
not much more to say about that one.
I move that we approve policy 9160, public attendance at school events as presented.
And I second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
And that passes 2-0, like everything else passed 2-0, except for the one we are holding out on. And that includes the recommended updates section. It was a long one. We also have, can get my, one policy, 5350, student suicide, which really requires no addition, because, Joe, you want to just explain that?
Explaining that this is a policy that, under current board practice, allows the administration to add a employee group if it was omitted by error, which was. So our student suicide policy will now have school social worker in it. We've talked about it in the past. The committee doesn't need to take action on it. It's a correction that Linda's going to make in policy. And we will make sure that that is in your script, Bill, for the
Right,
next policy
yeah,
committee.
just put
Or next board
the
meeting, I'm
words
sorry.
in there just like that. That's good.
Doesn't require any action, just
No
it's
action,
done.
it's just a correction that we need to notify you of.
Okay, and the third section of, or not, grouping that we have of policies which we have changed in a policy so that we can take these as they come, usually in large chunks. These are really non-debatable because they are dealing with, I lost my place completely here. Hang on a minute. Oh, it wasn't in that one. They are dealing completely with laws or policies or from federal agencies, state agencies that we have to comply with.
Yes.
These are updates to meet those compliance, to be compliant with those things. Now, we have about 24 of these. I don't know if we have to go through each and every one of them.
We do have the summary document.
Yeah.
It goes policy by policy, and
Maybe
perhaps we'd like to just try to reference
Yeah, let's just try it that way.
this.
And we can, because we have to vote on this as a committee, right?
The committee, these are going to be things that are handled at the committee level only. This is the first reading at the committee. We would hopefully then have approval of these in.
Next month?
Yeah, what's next month? April. Sorry, it's getting a little
get
cluttered,
it.
but these are ones that have a direct. These aren't policies where we debate a whole lot. These are recommended changes by the law. The only two policies that I would point out to you that would get final approval tonight, and I would ask that we do have a final motion to approve, would be items E and F. We had non-discrimination and access to equal educational opportunity. That went to the board last week. As did Section 504 and ADA prohibition. And so we would want to make sure that those policies get approved tonight and then put. So as we go through this list, again, for first readings, we've never held a motion on those because we're staying at committee. We're just bringing them to you as an or a discussion piece if we need to tonight.
But we could do that.
But I would ask that when we do go through the list, E and F get a motion in for approval tonight.
That's 22, wait a minute. Here we are, 2260 and 60.01.
Yep.
We can do that. Do
So if you'd like, I could just go
you
through.
want to start going through these?
Sure.
Just quickly, what the government's telling us to do.
Sure. Policy 0144.1 compensation. So this is a bylaw that applies to the board. The policy incorporating a recent statutory modification allowing board members to refuse salary has been clarified to deal with the procedure for board members who are not in the initial year of their term who also wish to refuse to accept salary. The modification is recommended for consistency with the state statute. So this again talks about how you as board members would be compensated and the timelines by which you would have to notify the district that you did not want your pay.
Right.
Policy 1422, 3122, 4122, non-discrimination and equal employment opportunity. The United States Department of Ed, Office of Civil Rights expects to see policy language mandating that school districts retain records and materials gathered during the course of investigations of harassment. The revised policy now includes a section addressing the board's responsibility to maintain investigatory records. Boards should already be maintaining such records as a matter of practice. This change is consistent with what we discussed under the non-discrimination, equal access to educational opportunity, and the 504 ADA prohibition.
Okay.
So similar language, similar process. Policy 1662, 3362, 4362, employee anti-harassment. The policies are revised to clarify the investigation process and the rights of the accused, so the person who's being accused of this, during the course of the investigation, including the effective failure to meet certain timelines and including a new section authorizing the use of administrative leave pending an investigation. Further, the the Office of Civil Rights expects to see policy language, again, mandating that certain districts retain records and materials gathered during this. So again, it's very consistent with what you saw above, but it also includes the rights of the accused. 2131, educational outcome, goals, and expectations. The legislature has amended the educational outcomes, goals, and expectations, which are incorporated into policy. The revisions provided here reflect the changes that should be adopted in order to have accurate policy language. This is a legal update. Again, now this is a policy that I'm requesting the committee vote on tonight, so I'll put it out there for you.
2131 was?
This is 2260, non-discrimination and equal access to educational opportunity.
Yeah, that's the one.
So I will give you the expectation or the additional language. So the Office of Civil Rights expects to see the language mandating that the school districts retain records and materials gathered during the course of investigation of harassment. The revised policy now includes a section addressing the board's responsibility to maintain the records. Board should already be maintaining that. And this would be one where I'm requesting a vote on tonight, if you could.
Okay, and there's a few other words that are adjusted in here too, but the records. You want to make
So
a
I move that we approve policy 2260, non-discrimination and access to equal educational opportunity, as presented.
seconded? Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 2-0, Lynn. That's 2260. And we want to do the same thing with 60.01.
.01 as well. So in order to remain in compliance with the Office of Civil Rights, this policy needs to be updated with the changes listed. This policy had been through the full board as well as committee tonight.
And we didn't hear
No,
any
we had no-
disapproval discussion at
No.
the school board level. So I move that we approve policy 2260.01, section 504, ADA prohibition against discrimination based on disability.
And I second that. Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. 2-0, Lynn. 020.
For the next one, we have a numbering issue, I believe, because on our summary sheet and the way it was presented,
Oh, I didn't catch that.
I'm thinking it should be 2270 rather than, as listed at the top of that form, 2700? On the summary.
Shoot.
270.
I knew one was wrong, I wasn't sure which one.
So the one on the this policy itself is accurate?
Correct.
Yeah, okay. Joel?
Yes, the language which refers to prior statutory programs which are no longer active has been deleted from the policy. So this is a language update to the policy.
Okay.
Policy 3120, employment of professional staff. Policy is revised to clarify the legal requirements about full-time teacher contracts and situations in which employment before board approval may be permitted. The policy has been revised to reflect that the board by majority vote is required to improve the employment of all employees.
We do that usually in the pink sheets?
HR committee, correct.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Then policy 3140, non-renewal, resignation, and termination. Policy is redrafted to clarify the process applicable to different types of employees depending on whether the employee is a teacher covered by 11822 and an administrator covered by 11824, an employee not covered by express statutory rules but who has an employment agreement, and other employees. So under this policy, this breaks out
It looks
this
like
one.
a new policy.
Yeah, it is. It is. It's new. It's not necessarily new. It's just, it's redrafted.
Yeah.
It talks about non-renewal, resignation, and termination. The non-renewal practice is listed here, non-renewal, so it's explained. Termination talks about what termination means and how that would be applied. What protects or what applies to a part-time teacher, because you have different requirements when you're on a part-time contract versus a full-time. What is covered under administration? Administrators are not all in the same category. Some of them fall into a statutory area, some don't. Administrators with contracts, including provisions governing termination. So those would be administrators that are not covered in statute. And then administrative personnel with no contractual or statutory coverage. We have some administrators in the district who don't necessarily have to fall into a license type area, but they have an administrative level contract.
Okay.
And then 5111, eligibility of resident, non-resident students. Revisions to this policy are made to more accurately reflect the district's responsibility in determining resident status of a student at enrollment. Standard residency considerations apply to all student age individuals regardless of alienage, with a lone exception of a student exchange programs, students who are here under the student exchange program in a district-sponsored F1 status, or in some cases, outside organizations with J status. So these would be kids who are foreign exchange students to the district. In addition, the policy is revised to avoid situations that put the district in a position of interpreting custody or physical placement placement orders within the context of divorced or separated parents. This is an issue that we deal with regularly. It is the responsibility of the parents to address perceived violations of custodial physical placement and order and or educational placement disputes. We are very clear with our parents that we don't mediate the divorce situation. They need to go seek clarification on that. Finally, the policy is also revised to clarify the imposition of conditional enrollment in the case of a student permitted to enroll that would otherwise be excluded from enrollment due to expulsion from another school district. And when you look at this, this policy under the expulsion piece, if we are willing to accept a student from another district that has been expelled, we need to bring that student to the Board of Education, and the Board of Education then has to accept that student, because only a board can overrule the order of another Board of Ed.
And this came up just last night at our expulsion panel. So again, this is fascinating. It's like, oh, this is exactly what I wanted to find out, what the policy was.
I didn't realize that last thing you just said, so,
That's under O.
yeah, I see it here. That up till now, of course, I don't know that we've had one in years. Maybe we have, but I don't remember it coming through the
This is
board.
relative, it's never been a new order, but it's been recently clarified in policy because, really it comes up with the advent of the virtual schools where, in the last 10 years, you've had a lot of virtual schools, and a student will be expelled from one school district. Another school district that runs a virtual school will accept the student, but the administrator cannot overrule that other board. They technically have to take all those kids through their own Board of Education to be approved or not approved.
Through us.
Through you as a board.
Coming
yeah.
into EHE. When EHE is notified of a student coming in, do they get notification that there was an expulsion?
Yep, all the records are sent to Lynn. Lynn shares those records with Rick and I, and we review the records, and in all cases, we deny the student who's been expelled.
Yeah, I can't remember a time we did, but I didn't even know that the board was approving them or not approving them.
The board would have to, if we said,
Accepted.
if we accepted the
Yeah.
student, the board would have to.
Oh, only if we accept it.
As a matter of practice, we have not, we just, in trying to go down that road, we don't know all of the circumstances. We only know what was in the expulsion record.
I can't remember one.
We don't know what's been omitted from that record, and we want to make sure that we have a safe learning environment.
Okay. Yep, got it.
But we do still review all of those that come in.
Great, thank you.
The open enrollment program, 5113. The language has been added to the policy to be consistent with the statutory provision addressing non-resident school boards approving applications that were initially denied. The policy is also revised to remove reference to the transition year of 15-16 and to incorporate changes to the alternative application procedures implemented by emergency rule. So again, it's the open enrollment program. We operate in accordance with this. Nothing substantial in this policy. Foreign exchange students, non-immigrant students, and visitors program. The language has been deleted from the policy, which suggests a host family must reside in the district. Since a host family may be a non-resident family that has one or more children open enrolled to the district, the deletion of the residency reference is required for consistency with law.
Okay.
Attendance policy has been updated to reference revisions to the law which now permit but do not require delivery of notices under the law by way of electronic mail. The policy update is recommended to assure accuracy to the permitted notice mechanisms and must be updated to reflect that mailing notice is only permitted after telephone, personal contact, or email communication unless the parent has refused email. So we're allowed to use electronic forms of communication first before we send anything out certified to the family. Student anti-harassment, the Department of the Office of Civil Rights expects to see policy language mandating that school districts retain records and materials during the course of the investigation. Again, this is the very similar language to what you saw earlier.
Yeah.
Alcohol and drug prevention, language has been added to the policy to be consistent with the requirements of Act 262, now reflected in statute with respect to the components of education regarding alcohol and drug abuse issues. Payroll deductions, language regarding withholdings and deductions has been clarified. You can see that right in the middle of the page. Any such deduction must be expressly authorized in writing by the employee on an annual basis. It's important to have the annual basis part.
Yeah. So if you've asked for more withholding one year, you have to do it again the next year, otherwise it's going to go away?
Yep.
That would be extremely important to make sure the staff knows.
Right. We'll make sure that the staff is updated upon board approval or committee approval. Fair Labor Standards Act, the policy has been revised to eliminate the requirement that this policy be distributed annually. The law requires posting notices concerning the Fair Labor Standards Act, but not distributing the policy every year. So in all public employee areas, generally the teacher's lounge or some sort of gathering place, we make sure the FLSA information is posted. Audit, minor revisions are made to the policy to clarify better represent the audit process utilized by the districts. So we have our annual audits. They follow the WUFAR requirements. That is generally reported back, I believe, through the F&F committee.
Yep. There it is.
Weapons, the reference to a 3-inch lockback knife has been removed to be consistent with law and district policies regarding weapons. So you can see that a lockback knife having a blade longer than 3 inches. So the policy has been changed to say a knife lawfully used for food consumption or preparation, or a knife used for lawful purposes when the scope of the person's business while on district property.
We approved this one recently?
We did not, we discussed it, but we did not approve it.
So did we say we want to take it back for some reason?
No, we brought a big stack of policies to the board committee
one
at
of them?
one time. And then we got into our revision process with Neola, and we never got back to some of these policies.
That's
because
why
we
some of them
decided-
are looking familiar.
Right, because there were some policies that were changed in the first revision packet, and then we were notified that some of those same policies were going to be revised
Revised
again in
again.
the second packet, so we combined it, and that's why we've got such a long agenda this evening.
Okay.
Notification of educational options. Policy has been revised to reflect the changes to the terminology used regarding educational options. So this is the Start College Now and the Early College
it's
Credit.
the Same thing again, right?
The student records policy, the requirement that students' record be transferred to a new school the next working day if such a request is received in writing. So this just expedites the timeline that we have to pass off records to another district if a student leaves us and enrolls there.
What happens in a situation where if you don't know that the person, I mean, if they leave the district and you didn't know they're going to show up elsewhere?
Whenever they show up, we'll get a records request, and then we have a day to turn that request around. If a
Next
kid
day.
leaves us and doesn't enroll anywhere, then that student would be withdrawn to an unknown location.
Okay.
And if they never enrolled anywhere else, they'd count as a dropout.
But if they do enroll, for instance, if they're expelled from here and they do enroll in another district without telling anybody, eventually that'll catch up.
Right, right,
Okay.
because the records that, every student's got a number. There's a number attached to every kid. That number goes from one school system to another. That number then would trigger any sort of notifications to the state level and to the other district that kid's trying to get into their school system.
Does that work with other states?
The other states, generally when a kid comes in, they want to have a cumulative record with them.
But what
That
if,
cumulative record, they call and request it.
okay, but one person could leave here and go to another state, and that, his or her ID wouldn't travel.
The ID wouldn't travel,
State would have, somebody in that other state would have to,
but that's
Come to
somebody in that school district that they try to enroll in would reach out to us for the
Okay.
records. That's a condition of enrolling in a district, to let us access your
oh, it
education.
is, everybody would follow that.
Right.
Okay.
But the ID number that a student has is.
In Wisconsin,
Right,
statewide.
nice, statewide.
Statewide, yeah, that I knew, or I thought, yeah, okay.
Environmental health and safety program, the policy was revised to remove the establishment of school and district safety committees. We have the district safety committee that is an entity of the board. Any other work is just a work group that goes beyond that to take a look at, chemicals that we have in schools or playground equipment or what have you. It's operational, it's not board directed. Child abuse and neglect, there are substantial changes to this one. The district has been revised the policy reflecting training, reporting, and procedural requirements concerning the different districts' efforts to combat child abuse and neglect. The requirement was put in place as part of the school safety legislation passed earlier this year by the state legislature. So you will note in here, and you've had a chance to read it, it goes through the training that we have to provide, the reporting of suspected child abuse and neglect, who's responsible for that. This is going to be a change for us, the reporting procedures. And then you will see that there are certain things that were removed, child abuse and neglect process. These are all things that, that based off of the change in law, we are required to remove from our policy. So I just bring that to your attention. That comes about as a change in state law. We will be updating staff on that pending committee approval. Food service, again, this has been revised to include language regarding the time frame for forwarding complaints to the Civil Rights Division of the USDA. You can see what that is in the policy. And then school visitors, statutory citation has been added to the policy to expressly reference section 120.1335 of the state statutes, which grants school boards the authority to control the presence of persons on school grounds.
Wow,
That is it.
good read.
All I got.
Now, these, we've read, this last group, we've read, had our first reading on it, and we will be able to approve it at the next committee meeting.
So if you have, as a committee, if you have any questions on those,
We should bring them up.
bring them up. It would be, a situation, since you were here for the first reading on them, if Mrs. Brezink is available to join us next month, perhaps we could, get her up to speed if she's got any questions ahead of time, but they've gone through their first reading now as, at the committee level, so.
Yeah, we'll, want to get a note to her. Maybe, Lynn, you and I could get a specific note off to her in the next couple, before the next meeting. Add that to our meeting or something like that.
Summarize real quick, because we did a lot tonight. Based on the new policies that were passed at the last board meeting on the new way that we are approving policies and the new way we're allowing this committee to have final jurisdiction over certain things. The new policies that were approved tonight will go to the April full board, come back to the April committee, and go to the May full board for approval.
Right, because
The
that's,
recommended updates were approved tonight, and they'll go to the April full board for approval.
right.
And then finally, this last section of legal updates were not approved tonight. They had their first reading per the new policy, and they will go for approval at the May Policy
Committee.
Committee meeting, final approval.
Just for clarification, all the board members will receive a copy of those to be able to look at those as well. If they have anything they want to bring up before we make the decision to approve them, they'll have a chance to
Yes,
see.
all board members get all the same information that committees do in their Friday
in the
packet.
Friday
So,
packet.
Yep, correct.
They just don't have to address them at the school board level.
Correct.
I think maybe before, when that packet goes out for the next board meeting, maybe on bright pink paper, we'll send them a notice. Please look at these.
It'll be, these last legal updates will go April 12th.
Wait, no, I was talking about the Not the legal, oh, the updates, yes.
Right, right.
Wait, what do we call it?
Revisions.
No,
The last
revisions.
section.
It's the revisions we have to take to the board
Yes.
with one reading.
Correct. Those will go April 10th at the full board, so they'll be in each board member's packet the Friday before, which is April
If I remember, we'll
5th or
put a
6th.
bright pink notice on there.
Okay.
One reading and approval. Okay. Who will complain about that?
I don't have any further recommendations for additional meetings.
That's right, that's next on my agenda. Good catch, Joe. And other is needed, nothing there either, right? Look at that. Who says we aren't working hard? This meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.